What is happening, dudes? This is Trent with Trent's Game Room. Check it out. I am a game developer, but I am also a gamer. I like to play games and I like to talk about them. And I have a fancy YouTube channel, so why not talk about games on my YouTube channel where I also post all of my art videos? Why not? Why not? I have an immense love for games through and through, and I thought it'd be fun since I don't have a water cooler to go and just chat with coworkers at. I might as well chat with you guys about some of the games that I've been playing. Top of my list and one of my most anticipated games for this year was Dark Souls 3. And I played this on the PS4 and I was super stoked. I actually took a couple of days off from work. I told my clients, listen, man, I can't be working for a couple of days. And I didn't realize, I mean, every time I forget just how involved a Dark Souls game gets. And the blood, the sweat, the tears, the nights where I just want to throw my controller and I tell my wife maybe this game isn't for me anymore, and then I come back to it the next day. It is a difficult game. Dark Souls is a difficult game. If you haven't had any exposure to the series, well, it might not be for you. It is not a game for everybody. This is definitely a series that is well known for its difficulty, but once you understand how to play it, there is really an easier way to do everything. If you get really frustrated with a boss, for instance, you can summon other players to help you fight that boss, but it doesn't teach you how to do that. You have to figure out a lot of it. In fact, to tell you a short story, I'll keep it quick. The first Dark Souls game I owned, I did not play Demon Souls. I started with Dark Souls 1, and I had bought it because I was working on Diablo, and everybody at work was like, oh, Dark Souls, it's so cool, it's so dark, and it's so nice, and so cool. And I didn't understand it. I bought it, and I just got crushed. I was like, this is the most difficult thing I've ever experienced and not enjoyable. It's just, I'm getting pummeled. And the reason was because I didn't know how to play. And my friend Josh came over one time and he's like, dude, you have Dark Souls, but you don't play it? And I was like, no, it's too hard. I don't get it. I don't understand how I just keep dying and losing everything. It seems like it's just a experiment in punishment. And how it's almost an experiment to see like how much can the human psyche withstand before giving up. And so he's like, no, listen, let me show you. And so he fires it up and he runs through and he's like, here's how you heal. Here's how you level up. Here's how you allocate your stats. Here's why this weapon is better than this other weapon. And he kind of walked me through the basics of how to play. And I wish there was something in Dark Souls that just gave you that little introduction. It's not an easy mode, not like a tutorial section. Literally in Dark Souls 1, you walk into a room and you're supposed to die. You don't have to, but you're supposed to die to teach you that when you die, you go to this hub area, and that's where you can level up and do all these other things. And so after he taught me how to play Dark Souls 1, I was hooked. And of course, I think I spent about 150 hours in Dark Souls 1. And sure, it was difficult. I had no idea that you could summon other players. I just kept getting invaded by other players. So I was like, I just don't even want to play online. So I stopped playing Dark Souls 1 online. And I know if you're a Dark Souls player, you're cringing right now because you understand that basically I chose hard mode. I chose the most difficult way to play that game. And there are some really epic Orenstein and Smaug are considered some of the most challenging bosses in video game history and some of the most recognized for their difficulty. And I soloed them. I played through the whole game, even beat the end boss on my own solo. And it was a really rewarding experience because even though you get pummeled, you get destroyed, you get completely obliterated, and then you just want to quit, you want to give up. You still come back and you want to play more. The reason is because the reward for having overcome that challenge is so great. it's like you feel like you've taken on one of the most difficult tasks. I was proud to say that I've beaten each one of the games in the Dark Souls series. Although by the time I got to the third one, I will say I finally understood how to play the game. I don't think I understood how to play the game before. In fact, I would venture to say I don't even use magic very much. So I would say there's still so much about the game that I don't know how to do yet. And that's kind of one of the neat things about it, is that you could still go back into Dark Souls 1. I fired it up before Dark Souls 3. I couldn't wait. I was like, I need my fix. Before Dark Souls 3's release, I fired up Dark Souls 1, and I got way into it, and I started discovering there were so many things that I had no idea about how to do. And I might even still go back and play Demon Souls at some point, but for right now, Dark Souls 3 is pretty much the pinnacle. It is a massive game. There are tons of environments, and they are all really dark and creepy. I don't know how big the development team was, but they are a really talented bunch, because they put this game together in, like, I think less than 2 years. The neat thing about the story is that it doesn't just beat you over the head with it. Most RPGs, I think Japanese RPGs, they make this fatal error that I found with narrative and with storytelling, where they introduce you to a bunch of characters and they have them talking about their relationships, and they don't even get to any conflicts for a while. They give you no reason to care about this game or care about these players, and you're an hour in listening to these characters without any action or even deciding whether or not you like this game yet. And Dark Souls does the opposite of that. Dark Souls thrusts you into combat in the first few minutes. In the first few minutes, you'll probably die. And then you start to go, wait a minute, I'm not where I was before. Where am I? Like, why am I here? And you begin to realize that you're developing not just levels, but you're developing skills. And these skills are controller based. It's like, oh, now I know this new way to fight, or now I know this new strategy. Each new weapon that you add on, and each build that you create, each time you allocate points to a certain section of your character's stats, you're developing a new skill and a new play style. So even though I've played through the whole game, I tend to go great swords. I tend to go with the heaviest hitting, slowest moving, clunkiest things, because I want to run in and one-shot kill nearly everything that I face off against. And so I work just tirelessly to increase my strength and dexterity stats. And I highly, highly recommend that if you pick up Dark Souls 3, you watch a introductory guide. You go online, there's a couple of guys. Fighting Cowboy is one of my favorite guys to watch. Fighting Cowboy, he knows the lore for the universe of Dark Souls. There's a few other guys that will teach you like basics of how to play, little strategies. They're not spoilers, because the fact is that if you can't do it in the game, you don't know it. And that's kind of the cool thing about it, but it's also the frustrating thing about it. And I can tell you this, most people are not going to like Dark Souls. Most people who are not gamers are not going to care about this game at all. But if you're a gamer, if you grew up with like playing Ninja Gaiden or some of the more challenging games from gaming history, the gaming past, you're going to look at this and go, this is the pinnacle of everything that we learned about game development, psychology, balance, risk versus reward. There's so much psychology in this game, and that's what makes it really great. The feeling that you get when you overcome an obstacle that is really challenging is tremendous. And one of the things about it, even the most basic enemies, these grunts that you're watching the player fight right now, these grunts could kill you. They're like the lowest level guys. They're the easiest guys to kill. But when you're starting out, they can wreck you, especially if they group up on you. And a lot of times it feels like the developers are simply trying to set you up to die. Like they're trying to trick you. They'll put an object in a place that makes you really tempted to go over there and get that item. And then as soon as you walk through that corridor, 3 guys jump out like raptors from either side of you and just feed on you. And But here's the neat thing. You come back to that same spot and now you know that they're there and now you're prepared for it. And now you've got a shield in one arm and you're holding that up and you're just barely stepping in that doorway and then backing out. And then you've got your weapon ready and you know exactly like where they're going to be coming from and you've got a better strategy on how to take them down. And that's really what the whole game is about. It's about learning from your experience, coming back, and then being challenged with, now I know the strategy, but can I do it? And when you pull it off, it feels tremendous. There's a really cool thing about this game also, and a lot of these things that I'm talking about are a lot like life, and that's what I love about it. My wife was reading a book recently about the two types of mindset. There's a growth mindset and there's a static mindset. The static mindset does not want to grow. The static mindset does not want to be challenged with things. The static mindset wants things to be easy. And the growth mindset wants to keep coming back to challenges and facing those challenges. This is the same thing as achieving great feats in art, in the arts, or in a creative field. Being faced with competition, what do you do? How do you handle it? Do you pack up and go home, or do you keep coming back for more? And it's not. It is kind of a choice in how you choose to train your psychology. But what's neat about it is that this game is not going to appeal to everybody, and so I find that most people that do like this game have a growth mindset, and that tends to be the kind of mindset that I get along with the best. It's not to say that I don't appreciate everybody. I think everybody has a lot to offer, but what I'm trying to say is, when I meet another Dark Souls fan, I get along with them really well, really quickly. That's not always the case because, hey, I'm very, very, I'm not a very likable person, I guess is the best way to put it. I don't like everybody and not everybody likes me. But when I meet a Dark Souls fan, usually we get along pretty damn well. Mostly because we find it relates to a lot of other things in life, especially artists. I don't know that I've worked on some pretty dark games. Diablo 3 had some pretty dark stuff in there, and it was tough to draw gore and gruesome demons and blood and guts and stuff for like 5 years. And design torture chambers. That was a kind of a dark time in my life. But it's really nice as a gamer to go back to something like Dark Souls, the universe of Dark Souls, and visit it as a somebody who's playing it, experiencing it, the discomfort that I get from settings. There's a lot to note here from a conceptual artist standpoint. I'm looking at architecture. I'm looking at color use. I'm looking at scale. I'm looking at the one thing this game does really, really well is set an atmosphere that feels very whimsical, but also very grounded and very dark. Very dark. And not just using black. They still have a lot of color. It's mostly a lot about light usage, the usage of light, the usage of materials. And one of the things I noticed, yeah, sure, they do a lot of like copy and pasting with gravestones in certain areas. And you really begin to notice what are kind of considered prefabs, which are like where you've got a copy of a piece that's used in a different way. If you are looking to get into game development, pay attention to those things when you're playing through Dark Souls. So I love the game design. I love the art direction. I think that they got just the perfect blend of stylization and realism. Mostly the materials feel very real, but a lot of the shape language gets very like dynamic. And one of the things this game does very well is that each enemy type has a very unique silhouette, kind of a shape or some element about them that you immediately notice as unique. And that really has to do with the 1, 2, 3 breakdown of shapes. And I go a little bit more in depth on this in some of my character design tutorials, but this game does it exceptionally well. But it also marries that blend of realism and dark fantasy realism that it's a challenge to do this sort of a thing. Believe me, I dealt with a lot of this kind of a thing working on Diablo. That's the only frame of reference I have for the games that I've worked on. Everything else that I've worked on is pretty lighthearted stuff. I guess League gets pretty dark at times, but it's more of a stylized kind of a dark. The other thing I will mention is the gameplay. I really like the improvements with kindling, using embers in this game. I really liked the improvements in the user interface. So much more sleek. I like the diverging paths everywhere. They reused a lot of environments, which I thought was very clever. They reused areas but lit them differently, and it didn't feel cheap. It didn't feel like they were just trying to get more mileage out of it. I don't necessarily want to talk about Bloodborne, but I think I kind of have to. There was some concerns that Dark Souls was going to feel too slow in contrast to Bloodborne, because Bloodborne is very much, there's no shield, there's no blocking in Bloodborne. It's if you don't know, it's another game by the same developers, or some of the same developers, and it's more action based because when you take a hit, you can actually recover some of your health by attacking very quickly, which psychologically encourages the player to jump right back into battle and not really back off from enemies. So he's just running in and attacking all the time. Whereas Dark Souls is much more shield based. A lot more players throughout the history of Dark Souls would try to get the biggest shield that does 100% physical defense and walk into a fight, almost every fight, with your shield up. And people were concerned that it would slow down the game, or that after playing Bloodborne they wouldn't be able to go back to something where it's more slowed down. But I think that they did the perfect amount of balance with that. I do carry around a shield, and I prefer more slow paced gameplay because I like to stop and look around the environments. I like to take a note of the statuary and take a note of some of the architecture. Take a look at the subtle little story elements that are implemented into the environments, the settings, the carvings on the floor. I like to stop and look at the vistas. I think by the time I finished it, I think I spent about 70 hours in this game. And yes, I did call on a lot of help to get there because I got a lot of contracts that are coming in right now, and and a huge game library that's just piling up right now. So I needed to finish Dark Souls 3, but I will definitely be doing a new game plus. But going back to the Bloodborne versus Dark Souls thing, I would definitely say like Dark Souls 3 tops Bloodborne because of the variety of weapons. One, two, I enjoy the setting a little bit more. I like the Bloodborne universe as well, but I'm much more of a Souls fan, a Dark Souls fan, just from the perspective that it's defend and attack, whereas Bloodborne is all just attack and dodge, which I tend to just prefer a little bit slower paced gameplay style. They're not the same game. By no means should you ever think, hey, if I'm not a Bloodborne fan, why would I be a Dark Souls fan? No, dude, you should give it a chance. I don't think they do things like demos for this series. If you get a chance to, maybe play an old Dark Souls game. And like I said, if you're new to the whole thing, definitely watch a guide, a beginner's guide, and don't go magic, go physical damage for your first run. You will die a lot in this game, and you lose your ember when you die. When you lose your ember, you can't summon other players. You can't summon other players to help you. And one of the things, oh man, there's some so cool. Some of the things that they had in this game. There was the Order of Blue, the Covenant of Blue, and if you get this thing that you can equip, and if you get invaded by a enemy phantom, if another player invades your world, you can it'll just automatically summon somebody from your covenant to come and help you as a blue phantom. But likewise, later on in the game, you can actually get an item that allows you to be summoned when somebody else gets invaded, if they're in the same covenant as you. So there's like this really neat, subtle multiplayer, cooperative, and competitive PvP type of a thing. I've also had instances where people gang up and they set up a staged event where they're summoning people to their world only to be killed by their buddies who are red phantoms in their world, and they're plotting to try to get points with their covenant is what's essentially happening. And that can be discouraging when people do that sort of a thing, but I felt like this is a game that is a very exceptional in terms of how it discourages you, and then it gives you just enough hope that you can accomplish that and overcome that. There are things where there are some cheap situations where I feel like I got robbed a little bit, but overall, once I did overcome the challenge, or I was able to sort of call in somebody to help me through those situations, it ended up being something that was just so enjoyable, so fulfilling, so wonderful, so amazing. This game is fantastic. It's my game of the year so far this year. Let me think. Of everything that I've played this year so far, absolutely, Dark Souls 3 is the mustard. It is the ketchup, potatoes, and cheese on my chili fries. So with that in mind, I give it a solid 7.1. Just kidding. This is I don't like to do scores. Uh, I like to dole out the pickles. So I'm gonna give this one a 9.9 pickles. And the only reason why it's a 9.9 pickles is because that last zero point 0.1 pickle, that 1%, 10% of a pickle, is reserved for the every person. My mom would never play Dark Souls 3. So why would, if she read a 9.9 pickles, she'd be like, why? This game isn't good. I'm just dying all the time. If they get that intro thing and teaching people how to play it, then they get that extra 10% of a pickle. Anyway, that's it for my overly elaborate explanation of my ranking system. I want to know from you guys, like, what was your favorite Dark Souls game? What was your favorite one in the series? For me, definitely three takes the pickles home. I there will always be a special place in my heart for one, but I think it's just because this is PlayStation 4, baby. This is the newest stuff. This is the creme de la crop, the culmination of the series, because the director has stated he is no longer going to be involved in the series. Now, I don't know how involved he was before. There might be a Dark Souls 4, but from all accounts and everything that I've been hearing, they're done with this series. They're not going to do any more Dark Souls games. It's going to be something new now. So I want to know from you guys, what was your favorite Dark Souls game? What was your most challenging boss? What stood out to you in this game if you played it? If you haven't played it, why not, dude? What's wrong? Give it a shot. Give it a try. It might not be for you. That's okay too. If you guys like hearing me talk about video games, let me know in the comments which ones you'd like to hear my thoughts on. What are you playing that I should be playing? If you like to see tutorials on how to draw and how to make game art, please subscribe to my channel because that's mostly what I do here. I just love games, love talking about them, and so that's why I'm doing the Trent's Game Room. Until next time, dudes, game with passion, and I will catch y'all manana bond. Ciao, baby.